Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. On behalf of my co-authors, I will be presenting on the comparison of pregnancy incidence among African women in a randomized trial of intramuscular depomedroxyprogesterone acetate, copper IUD, and the levonorgestrel implant. The authors declare no conflict of interest. So we do know that sub-Saharan Africa is disproportionately affected by high rates of unintended pregnancy. As shown in the pie chart, approximately 52% of the pregnancies will occur due to method non-use, and about 4 in 10 will occur because of inconsistent or incorrect use of family planning methods, and approximately 5% will be due to contraceptive failure. There is very little data, particularly randomized data, comparing pregnancy rates with different contraceptive methods as used by women in sub-Saharan Africa. Therefore, the purpose of this analysis was to compare pregnancy incidence among women randomized to DMPA-IM, copper IUD, or LNG implant, which was a protocol-defined objective of the evidence for contraceptive options and HIV outcomes, the ECHO trial. The ECHO trial assessed HIV incidence among 7,829 women from 12 sites in Eswatini, Kenya, South Africa, and Zambia who were seeking effective contraception and consented to be randomized to the 3 methods. Our primary exposure was contraceptive use, and we only included women who initiated their randomized method, and pregnancy analysis was done for perfect use. Perfect use was measured from the date the woman initiated the randomized method until their first discontinuation of randomized method, pregnancy, or last visit with no pregnancy. We also did additional analysis using typical use, and typical use was measured from the date the woman initiated the randomized method until they had a permanent discontinuation of the randomized method, pregnancy, or last visit with no pregnancy. Temporary time off method for any reason, for example, a late or missed DMPA injection, IUD expansion, or a clinician-initiated hold was also counted as typical use. Our main outcome variable was incidence pregnancy, and this was tested using a urine pregnancy test, which was done at the first and last visit and when clinically indicated, for example, for a late or missing period. And we included a pregnancy if the pregnancy was had an estimated date of fertilization after the date of enrollment and the woman was still on a method. The estimated date of fertilization was computed per a standardized algorithm, and this was reviewed by a blinded subcommittee, which was then calculated as the first day of the last menstrual period plus 14 days, or an ultrasound date minus the gestational age plus 14 days. This is some of our results on the demographics and behavioral data, and basically they were similar across the 3 randomized groups. The median age was 23 years. Majority of the women were single and never married, had some or complete secondary education, had 1 to 2 living children, and had a BMI of less than or equal to 30. In terms of previous contraceptive use history, 51% women had ever used DMPA-IM, 6.4% had ever used the implant, and 0.8% had used the IUD. Condom use during the last vaginal sex was less than 50%. We had a relatively high prevalence of STIs, with chlamydia being at 18.1 and gonorrhea at 4.7. A total of 7,829 women were enrolled and followed up. But for this analysis, we only include 7,710 women. We excluded 33 women who were estimated to be pregnant, that was retrospectively, at the time of the method initiated. These were 15 on the DMPA, 3 on the copper IUD, and another 15 on the LNG implant. We also excluded 86 women from the analysis because they never received their methods. That's 1 from the DMPA-IM, 79 from the copper IUD, and 6 from the LNG implant. A total of 255 pregnancies were reported, and 185 pregnancies of these occurred after women had actually stopped using their contraceptive method, and 70 pregnancies occurred during perfect use. The median days from randomization to the first pregnancy was 96 days for the DMPA, 252 days for the copper IUD, and 108 for the LNG implant with perfect use. So this slide shows the cumulative incidence curves for perfect use. The figures on the right are pregnancy incidence per 100 women years and pregnancy counts. The curves show that pregnancy was low across all three methods. However, the copper IUD appears to have a somewhat different slope, starting lower and then rising relatively higher compared to the other two methods. Overall pregnancy incidence, as you can see, was very low at 18 months and was about 0.61 for the DMPA-IM, 0.63 for the LNG implant, and 1.06 for the copper IUD. And in pairwise comparisons, there was no statistically significant difference in terms of the risk of pregnancy incidence between the method pairs. This is a bit of a busy slide, but it shows the typical use pregnancy incidence. The figure on the left shows the cumulative incidence curves for the typical use, which is somewhat similar to what we saw in the perfect use curves. But because we know that typical use incorporates a time when women are temporarily off their method, the pregnancy incidence per 100 women years are slightly greater, as you can see. And in adjusted models, typical use of copper IUD was associated with a statistically significant higher risk of pregnancy when compared to the LNG implant, with an adjusted hazards ratio of 1.74. The other comparisons did not reach statistical significance. So in conclusion, we found that both perfect and typical use of all three contraceptive methods resulted in very low pregnancy rates. Women using copper IUD had somewhat higher pregnancy rates than those using the LNG implants and the DMPA-IM. The DMPA-IM pregnancy incidence with typical use is much lower than has been reported in routine settings, and this may be attributed to the proactive tracing by research staff to ensure that participants came every 3 months. The higher pregnancy rates with the copper IUD may be due to the fact that there was lack of ascertainment of fundal placement of the IUD, thus increasing the risk of expulsion. We also know that partial or complete expulsions are often asymptomatic or unnoticed and may not trigger any action by both the providers or the clients. In summary, our findings provide strong justification to expand access to a range of contraceptive options, including the LNG implants and copper IUD for African women at risk of HIV. I'd like to acknowledge the ECHO Trial Consortium, the sites, and the participants, as well as our sponsors, without whom this work would not have been possible. Thank you.